So it's new guitar day and I'm holding a Reverend Airwave. This is a semi-hollow electric 12-string guitar that I got to add some versatility to my collection. Here is the headstock. I'm gonna knock out some of the front end stuff and then go over the reasons why you might want to get a 12-string electric guitar for yourself. So I never heard of Reverend until I started actively shopping for a 12-string. I wanted to get a Dan Electro at first because of the association with Jimmy Page, who's probably the most famous 12-string electric guitar player. But when I came across this guitar, I really liked the design because it was so unique. It's not like a Strat or Les Paul copycat. It's almost some weird hybrid between the two with the cutaways, and also a bit of a Rickenbacker influence, which is the 12-string guitar that I wish I could afford. But this guitar plays pretty nice. It's much lighter than it actually looks because of the semi-hollow cut, and it rests pretty comfortably on the leg like this when you're sitting. The finish is called Deep Sea Blue, but personally I think it's more of like a vintage 50s hot rod kind of blue. It has a white pickguard and a similar complementary white contour around the edge of the body as well. I picked this finish in particular because I found that it serves almost as a perfect complement to my RR3. So you have a guitar with sharp corners, it's red and black as opposed to the blue and white. So I think they just pair together really nicely with the contrast. Let's get this out of the way. I also managed to find this equally beautiful guitar strap that matches the guitar almost perfectly. So when it comes to the aesthetics of this guitar, I'm pretty happy. Although the one thing I don't like is actually the position of the strap lock, which is kind of hard to see, but it's on this cutaway around the edge. What that does is it causes the weight of the guitar to pull on your strap and puts a lot of tension on the shoulder, unless you let the guitar default to the position that it kind of wants to settle in, which is an angled position like this, which is okay for strumming when you're standing, but it's actually quite difficult, to pick. You kind of have to get your hand in a Marty Friedman kind of way, angle if you want to start picking individual notes. So you kind of have to play the guitar like this and allow that extra bit of tension on the shoulder because of the way the strap lock is. I would have very much preferred if they put the strap lock on the back of the guitar right here. So as far as sound specs goes, we have single coil pickups, and also 3 knobs, your standard volume control, and also 2 tone knobs, which are pretty interesting. With the volume knob turned all the way down, this is how the guitar sounds fully acoustic. So very bright, crystal clear sound, strong acoustic resonance from the sound hole. In fact, the resonance is so strong that it's kind of hard for me to actually hear the amped up tones clearly at the same time that I'm playing because of how loud the acoustics are. For the sake of this demo, I'm actually recording the amped up signal directly into my audio interface instead of through this microphone that I'm speaking into right here. Now, with the volume knob turned up, this is what the signal sounds clean. The first tone knob we have here is a pretty standard tone knob. It adds or cuts treble depending on whether you have all the way down, you get a bassier tone. And all the way up, you get that treble, the max position. The second tone here is called a bass contour. What I found it does is that it rolls off the low end so that you don't get this over response, which tends to happen with clean tones. I think what's going on is that the thicker strings physically create a stronger resonance in the electromagnetic field of the pickup, and the result is you normally have to EQ and compress in post to control the low end on clean tones. So with this bass contour knob, I can just dial it back slightly. And it kind of equalizes that low end without removing it completely. So let's check out the different pickup positions and of course hear some of those classic 12-string riffs that you just cannot avoid. So in the bridge position, we get this very standard single coil twang. This is kind of the signature tone for Southern rock, and it also works for this very famous 12-string riff. At the mid position, the tone smooths out a little bit and you get the slightly warmer mids. So. And on the neck, you get the biggest difference in tone. A ton of bass for those jazz chords, you know. Or you know, that one riff that goes like this. So now on to the more technical stuff. A 12 string is of course made by pairing the standard 6 strings on a guitar with a lighter gauge string tuned an octave above the root note. The exception is for the first 2 strings where smaller gauge strings don't exist, and you also can't tune the full octave up without the string breaking, so they're doubled at the same pitch. The octave pairing gives you a brighter tone and a fuller sound on each note. You also get this inherent chorus effect. What happens is when you pick the doubled strings, they resonate at different phases, and because the notes are an octave apart, the harmonic overtones will actually interfere with one another. So it sounds like you're using a chorus pedal, even though you're not. It's just the nature of the physics of the guitar itself. So this gives your chords this extra fullness, and even triads have the same impact as whole open chords on a regular 6 string. For example, this C triad right here, on these 3 notes, which is actually 6 strings being played at once, they contain all the same notes as a full open C chord on a 6 string plus a G on top. So when I strum the full chord, it's as if I'm playing the same exact chord on a 6 string guitar, and then when I do the open chord, you're getting tones that you would only get if you were to play a piano with both hands. When it comes to playing this guitar, it's a much slower instrument, meaning that it's harder to move around on the fretboard because of the extra friction and the tension that you get from the doubled strings. It's also a little bit awkward just to fret 2 strings cleanly at the same time, and it takes a lot of adjustment to get used to. On the picking side, it's even more difficult, especially when you're trying to do fast arpeggios, you know? And imagine sweeping. It's not good. This is the reason why 12 strings are primarily used as rhythm guitars. They're not particularly good for leads at all. Especially the bends are terrible because the paired strings don't even get to the same pitch. Like if I bend up this way, the string on the top bends to a slightly higher note than the one on the bottom just because of the physics of the string placement, and it sounds terrible. Another more subtle property that's unique to the 12 string is that the down pick and the up pick have very different tonal qualities because the string that you hit first will be more dominant once it absorbs the force of the pick before you get to the second string. On this guitar, the treble string sits on top of the bass string. So you get this bright down pick when you hit that treble string first, versus a slightly duller up pick because you hit the bass string first. So the bright down strums are great for songs that accentuate on the beat, like this one. I'm out of tune. Also, tuning this guitar can be a little bit time consuming. And you have to learn how to pick the string without hitting the other one. It's almost easier to do it with your fingers. there's that G string there. Let's try it again. So for a song like Every Rose Has Its Thorn, which accentuates on the beat, this guitar is perfectly great. For songs, on the other hand, that accentuate on the upbeat, you don't get as bright of a sound unless you reverse the picking direction. So this is something that you have to consider when you're trying to play or record a certain composition. There are also 12-string guitars that are strung the opposite way, with the bass string leading the treble. And again, if you have a guitar like that and you want to get that extra brightness on the accent of the song, you have to really think about how you're going to strum to achieve that sound. Here's a question: why bother getting an electric 12-string guitar? The clean tone produces a very unique sound. It's obviously recognizable when you listen to like a Led Zeppelin record or Pink Floyd record when a 12-string comes in, versus when any other guitar with a different set of effects. It just can't really be replicated. So if you're chasing that sound, that classic rock sound, you're really limited to your options. You're gonna have to get a 12-string electric guitar. This is a good instrument that you can substitute anywhere for an acoustic guitar or even a clean 6-string if you just want to get those fuller chords or those extra layers. This is exactly what you hear on Stairway to Heaven after the acoustic section, where you get that acoustic guitar playing these two chords, you know. It's just completely overwhelmed when that G major hits in. So if you're writing a song where it starts off small and then gets bigger and bigger and bigger, one very easy way to add just this depth of sound is to throw in a 12-string electric guitar. You can also layer this underneath an acoustic guitar piece, or even on top of a distorted guitar piece, like some riff that I played at the very beginning, Ziggy Stardust, where the main riff is being played by a distorted electric guitar while it's supplemented by an acoustic guitar on the record. You could easily add a 12-string electric guitar instead, and sounds perfectly great, if not better. So what about distortion? We rarely ever hear anyone play an electric 12-string guitar with distortion. Now, why is that? Let's take a look. So, in my opinion, I find that the sound of a distorted 12-string electric guitar kind of just sounds like a regular distorted guitar. There's really not much of a difference. You don't hear that octave doubled string sound. What happens is, under distortion, the effect of having these 12 strings is far more subtle. And the reason is because the compression and gain that creates distortion amplifies the harmonic overtones of the bass strings so that they match the strength of the same notes produced by the treble string. For the technical explanation, I mentioned overtones earlier, and here is the concept. So say I take a note. It has a primary frequency, but it also has a series of harmonic layers on top of it. So on the 12th fret, we get the 1 octave harmonic. On the 5th fret, we get the 2nd octave, and also various other harmonics on the 7th fret, 9th fret, and so on. These are called overtones. When you play the open string or any fretted string, these frequencies are ringing out at the same time. On a clean tone, the primary frequency is dominant, but with distortion, the primary frequency is clipped, and all the weaker amplitude overtones are amplified to the same level. That's what the sound of distortion is actually made of. So the addition of a treble string 1 octave higher to your bass note doesn't really make that strong of an impact, because the frequency of that string played open is the frequency of the bass string at the 12th fret. So basically, these notes share a lot of the same overtones, and when it gets distorted, they all just kind of meld together. What ends up happening is, when I start playing chords under the effect of distortion, especially power chords, which is just root notes and fifths that already meld together really well, it's not really noticeable enough to make a difference. When I do other harmonies, like a 7 chord that's more complex, then it's slightly more noticeable. So to revisit the question I asked before one last time, why did I bother getting an electric 12-string guitar, especially as a metal musician? Most of the time you hear a 12-string in metal, it's actually used pretty much the same way in other genres. Take for example this classic by Judas Priest. Or this one by Iron Maiden. Basically, we're just substituting the electric 12 for an acoustic or a clean guitar, and we never use it as a primary instrument under the effect of distortion. Well, I have my own ideas, which I'll reveal in time. What I'll say for now is that I always love to experiment. Whenever I come across something that no one ever does, that's exactly what I want to do. Like the acoustic bass that I use on my black metal project. By getting this guitar, I've challenged myself to find a way to incorporate a distorted 12-string as a primary guitar in metal, and I'm looking forward to discovering its full potential.